She stood at the altar in her white dress, bouquet trembling in her hands, and the man walking toward her was not her groom. He was the man her government had sent her to destroy. And God help her, she was still in love with him. How does a decorated Navy officer, a woman who survived war zones, deep-sea missions, and a father who told her she'd never be enough, end up standing in a secret garden in Seoul, South Korea, with tears streaming down her face and a diamond on her finger put there by the most dangerous man in Asia? How does the most feared crime lord on the continent, a man who built an empire out of silence and shadow, fall so completely, so helplessly, so beautifully undone by one woman in military boots who laughed in his face the first time they met? That, my darlings, is exactly what we're about to find out. This is not a fairy tale. This is better. This is the story of Lieutenant Amora Mensah of the Ghanaian Navy and Seo Jin-ho, CEO of the most powerful criminal organization in East Asia, and the love that nearly burned the world down. Before we begin, my mum said this video cannot reach 10,000 views and 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong. Smash that like button, subscribe right now, and drop in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get into this story. The night Amora Mensah almost died for the second time in her life, she was wearing heels. Not by choice, of course. Amora hadn't chosen heels since her cousin Abina's wedding in Accra 4 years ago, and even then she'd switched to flats before the first song ended. But tonight was different. Tonight, she was not Lieutenant Mensah of the Ghanaian Naval Intelligence Division. Tonight, she was Nadia Cole, American journalist, lover of overpriced champagne and gossip, and Nadia Cole absolutely wore heels to rooftop galas in Busan, South Korea. The Seo Tower rooftop glittered like a second sky. Every light in the city seemed to have been invited to this party, and every important, dangerous, or disgustingly wealthy person in Southeast Asia seemed to have shown up with them. Servers glided between guests like ghosts, carrying crystal flutes of champagne that probably cost more than Amora's monthly salary. Which, given that she was a decorated naval officer with 12 years of service, was saying something deeply unflattering about the champagne. Amora took a sip and resisted the urge to whistle. Okay, she thought. I'll give the criminal underworld this, they have excellent taste. She smiled at no one in particular and moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a woman who had infiltrated 4 separate criminal operations on 3 different continents. She spoke 7 languages. She could dismantle a detonator in under 90 seconds. She had once talked a Somali arms dealer into surrendering his entire arsenal using nothing but strong tea and a very convincing story about her grandmother. She was not afraid of Seo Jin-ho. That was what she kept telling herself. The briefing had been thorough. Seo Jin-ho, 36 years old. Only son of the late Seo Dae-jung, founder of the Seo Syndicate, the most sophisticated criminal organization in East Asia, dealing in arms, black market technology, and information brokerage at a level that made government agencies genuinely nervous. Jin-ho had taken over at age 24 after his father's death, and in 12 years, he had tripled the empire, eliminated 4 rival organizations, and somehow managed to maintain a spotless public profile as the brilliant, philanthropic CEO of Seo Global Holdings. The man had funded 3 children's hospitals. He also, allegedly, had 3 men buried under a mountain in Jeju. He was, by all intelligence accounts, extraordinarily dangerous. He was also, according to every photograph in the briefing file, extraordinarily beautiful, and Amora had spent a full 30 seconds being annoyed at that fact before professionally setting it aside and never thinking about it again. Or so she told herself. Her mission was simple: get close enough to retrieve the encrypted drive containing evidence of a weapons deal between the Seo Syndicate and a North Korean intermediary, evidence that, in the wrong hands, could destabilize 3 governments. In and out. No complications. She'd done harder things before breakfast. She was scanning the east wing of the rooftop for the private elevator that, according to her floor plans, led to Jin-ho's personal office, when she walked directly into a wall. Except walls did not, in Amora's experience, smell like cedar and dark amber. And they did not reach out and steady her with one firm, warm hand at her waist. She looked up. He was taller than the photographs suggested. That was her first thought. Her second thought, which she was deeply embarrassed about later, was that his eyes were the most unusual shade, dark brown shot through with something that looked almost amber in the rooftop lights, currently fixed on her with an expression that was equal parts amusement and something considerably more dangerous. Seo Jin-ho smiled. It was not a nice smile, precisely. It was the smile of a man who was used to being the most intelligent person in any room and was quietly delighted to have that confirmed. "You've been watching the East elevator for 11 minutes, he said. His English was flawless, accented just enough to be interesting. Most people who watch exits that carefully are either very nervous or very professionally trained. He tilted his head. "You don't look nervous." Amora's heart did something completely unprofessional. She smiled back, bright, easy, warm as a Accra morning, and said, "Maybe I'm just waiting for someone." "Are you?" "I am now." The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds and contained, somehow, about 40 years' worth of conversation. Jinho's smile changed. Sharpened. Like he'd just opened a gift and found something he hadn't expected and very much wanted. "Jinho," he said, extending his hand. "Nadia," she replied, taking it. His grip was firm. Hers was firmer. His eyes dropped to their joined hands and then rose back to her face with an expression that, if Amora had been a different kind of woman, might have made her step back. She stepped forward instead. "You have a beautiful building," she said conversationally. "I especially love what you've done with the East Wing." Something flickered behind his eyes. "He knows," a voice in her head whispered. "He knows something is off." But then he laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, low and warm and completely at odds with every photograph in her file, and said, "Come. Let me show you the rest of it." And Amora Mensah, decorated naval officer, 11-year veteran of international intelligence operations, made the single most consequential decision of her life. She went with him. Seo Jinho had not survived 36 years, 12 of them running an empire that required constant vigilance, perfect judgment, and the ability to read people the way others read text, by being fooled easily. He knew within 4 minutes of meeting Nadia Cole that she was not a journalist. Journalists, in his experience, asked questions with their mouths. This woman asked questions with her eyes. She clocked every exit, every camera, every body in the room, with the smooth systematic efficiency of someone who had been trained to do exactly that, and trained so well that the habit had become unconscious. She held her champagne flute but barely drank from it. She wore heels like a woman wearing a costume. And when he'd startled her by appearing directly in her path, her body had tensed into something that was not alarm but readiness, the coiled spring stillness of someone prepared for physical confrontation. She was intelligence. Military, probably. Too controlled for civilian agencies. She was also, without question, the most magnetic person he had encountered in recent memory, and Jinho found that fact deeply, genuinely inconvenient. He led her through the private corridor that connected the east rooftop to the gallery level, watching her peripherally as she catalogued everything around her with serene, smiling precision. She was good. He'd give her that. The smile never wavered, warm, genuine seeming, lighting up a face that was striking in its structure and animated in its expression, with cheekbones that could have been carved and eyes that gave away absolutely nothing she didn't intend. "So," she said, pausing at a painting on the gallery wall, a large canvas in deep blues and golds, abstract and unquiet. "Do you actually like art, or is this the kind of collection that's purely for intimidation?" Jinho stopped walking and looked at her. "Both," he said honestly. She laughed, and it was so genuine, so unguarded and bright, that for one distracting second, he forgot to be suspicious. Then she said, "Which ones do you actually like?" And the way she asked it, direct, curious, as if she actually wanted to know, did something strange to his chest that he declined to examine. He crossed his arms and studied the canvas she'd stopped at. "That one," he said. "Why?" He considered deflecting. He didn't. "Because it looks calm on the surface and completely chaotic underneath. I find that familiar." The look she gave him then was not what he expected. It wasn't the calculated interest look of a woman working him for information. It was the look of someone who'd heard something true and recognized it. Something shifted in those dark, clever eyes, brief, involuntary, real. Then it was gone, and she was smiling again. "I know a painting like that back home," she said. "My mother bought it from a street artist in Kumasi when I was 8. She said it was the most honest art she'd ever seen because it didn't pretend to be at peace." "Where is home?" "Accra." The word came out easily, comfortably. Before he watched it happen, she caught herself. Just a fraction of a second. Just a millimeter of tension at the corner of her mouth. So. Real name almost certainly Ghanaian. The Nadia Cole cover was a layer, not a foundation. Jinho filed this away and showed none of it. I've never been, he said simply. You should go. She turned from the painting to face him fully, and the smile she gave him now had something new in it, something private and warm and faintly sad. It's the most beautiful place in the world. And I am completely biased. You miss it. It wasn't a question. She blinked, and in the space of that blink, the intelligence operative and the cover identity both briefly disappeared, and he saw, just saw, a woman who was very far from home and very tired of pretending not to be. Sometimes, she said quietly. Then, does the tour include the office on floor 23, or is that above my clearance level? The audacity of it, the sheer, straight-faced audacity, hit him so unexpectedly that he actually paused. Then he smiled. Slow. Genuine. The kind he reserved for things that genuinely surprised him, which was rare enough to be notable. Above your clearance level, he said. For now. For now, she repeated, like she was tasting the phrase and finding it interesting. Ambitious timeline. I'm an ambitious man. I've heard that about you. The air between them did something complicated then. They were standing closer than they'd been a moment ago. He wasn't certain when that had happened, and the rooftop music filtering down from above was doing nothing to fill the silence that had settled between them with the comfortable, charged weight of something neither of them had planned for. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his head of security, Park June. Perimeter check complete. All clear. But we flagged one face from Interpol's regional contact list. Female, late 20s, Ghanaian military. Arrived under assumed identity. We're running the name now. Jinho looked up from his phone. She was watching him with steady, even eyes and a perfectly pleasant expression. Not nervous. Not moving toward the exit. Just watching him. Patient as a woman who had survived harder rooms than this one. He put his phone in his pocket. Are you hungry? He asked. Something flashed across her face. Surprise, recalculated, swallowed. You asking me to dinner? I'm asking if you're hungry. I have a private kitchen on 17. My chef is exceptionally good. She studied him for a long moment. He watched her weigh it, the mission against the invitation, the professional against the personal, the wisdom of retreat against something else she was clearly trying not to name. If the food is bad, she said finally, I'm leaving. It won't be. You seem very sure of yourself. I'm usually right. She smiled, sharp and bright and just slightly dangerous. We have that in common. Floor 17 had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire port of Busan. The city at night was a jeweled thing, all lights and water and the far-off blink of ships she would, under other circumstances, know the names and registered routes of. They ate at a small table by the window. His chef had prepared something with seared fish and a broth that smelled like the sea, and when Amora, not Nadia, he thought, Amora, almost certainly Amora, took the first bite, she closed her eyes for one honest second. Okay, she said. You were right. I know. She threw her dinner roll at him. He caught it without looking. They stared at each other. Then they both started laughing, real laughter, unplanned and helpless and perfectly, dangerously synchronized. And somewhere in the infrastructure of Seo Jinho's very controlled, very guarded, very deliberately solitary life, something quietly cracked open. He didn't notice it yet. But it had begun. By day 3, Amora had a problem. Several problems, technically, listed in order of professional severity. 1. She had not retrieved the drive. 2. She had, instead, had dinner with the target 2 nights in a row, and breakfast this morning, and was currently accepting a second cup of tea from his very efficient personal assistant while sitting in his office overlooking Busan Harbor like this was a completely normal thing that was happening. 3. And this was the one she kept trying to move down the list. She liked him. Not the cover version of liked. Not the he's useful to the mission liked. Actually, genuinely, inconveniently liked him. Found him interesting. Found herself paying attention to the way his mind worked, precise and lateral at once, like a chess player who'd also mastered improvisation. Found herself laughing at things he said that were only barely funny but delivered so dryly they became something else entirely. This was a problem. She was on the phone with her commanding officer, Commander Osei, every evening at exactly 9 p.m. These calls were the loneliest parts of her day, not because she missed the world outside the CEO tower, she'd been in deeper covers than this, but because they required her to be fully, only Lieutenant Mensa again, and that felt increasingly like putting on clothes that had shrunk in the wash. Asset hasn't been located, she reported. The office on 23 is biometric locked. I need at least 48 more hours. You have 36, Osei said. Not unkindly, but clearly. The sole liaison is getting nervous. After 36 hours we extract you regardless. I understand, sir. She understood. She also, as she hung up the phone and looked out at the harbor from the guest suite she'd somehow ended up occupying in the CEO tower, felt something that she categorized, with grim accuracy, as dread. Not of the mission. Of its ending. Get it together, Mensa, she told herself firmly. She got herself together. She put on her blazer, the navy one, professional, no nonsense, and she walked to Jinho's office and knocked with the confidence of a woman who had a plan. The plan was to charm her way into a tour of floor 23. What actually happened was that she walked into his office and found him standing at his window with his back to the door, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, and the tension in his shoulders so visible and so human that she stopped in the doorway and forgot, for just a moment, what she'd come for. He turned. The expression on his face was one she hadn't seen before, not the controlled amusement he wore like armor, not the sharp-edged assessment he used on everyone who came through his door. This was something unguarded. Something tired. Bad day, she asked, because she couldn't help it. He looked at her for a long moment. My sister called, he said. She hadn't known he had a sister. Is she okay? She's fine. She always calls to remind me that I'm wasting my life. He said it with a lightness that didn't quite cover the weight underneath. She wants me to come to Jeju for her daughter's birthday. My niece. He paused. She's 4. Amora leaned against the doorframe. When's the birthday? Saturday. Are you going? The look he gave her then was complicated in the way of a man who had built walls so high and so expertly that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be asked a simple question by someone who genuinely wanted the answer. I don't know, he said. You should go, she said. 4-year-olds don't stay 4. And sisters don't stay patient forever. He was quiet. Then, you sound like you know. I have a brother, she said. Kofi. 3 years younger. I missed his university graduation because I was in the middle of a mission in the Gulf of Guinea. She said it steadily, the way she trained herself to say things that hurt. He forgave me. But I haven't. The silence between them was different from the ones before. Warmer. Heavier. The kind that accumulates when two people have stopped performing for each other without quite meaning to. Jinho set down the papers he'd been holding and crossed the office toward her with the unhurried certainty of a man who had decided something. He stopped close enough that she could see the amber in his eyes again, that particular warmth the rooftop light had first shown her. Have dinner with me tonight, he said. Not here. Off the property. There's a place near the water that does the best galbai in Busan. Everything in Amora's professional brain said, redirect. Access 23. Retrieve the drive. 36 hours. Her mouth said, do they do jollof? Because I've been in this country for 4 days and if I don't have something with palm oil soon I'm going to start a diplomatic incident. He blinked. Then that laugh again, real and sudden and entirely unguarded. I'll call ahead. I'm serious. Tell them it's a matter of national importance. I'll tell them exactly that. They went. And Busan at night, she discovered, was nothing like Accra and somehow reminded her of it anyway. The water, the lights, the smell of the ocean carrying something ancient and familiar regardless of which coast it came from. They sat across from each other at a small table with candles burning low, and he told her about growing up in Seoul, the weight of his father's name, the loneliness of an empire that asked everything and offered nothing soft in return. And she listened, really listened, in the way she listened when something mattered. And she told him, not the cover story, not Nadia, but something with more Amora in it than she'd intended, about the sea. About why she'd joined the Navy at 19 over her father's very loud objections. About the first time she'd been on a ship in open water and felt, for the first time in her life, like she was exactly the right size. Most people feel small on the ocean, he said. I know. I felt the opposite. She turned her wine glass slowly. Like I could finally take up all the space I actually needed. He looked at her across the table with an expression she hadn't seen on anyone in a very long time. The particular look of someone seeing you, just you, without any of the layers. Amora, he said. Her blood went cold. And then, against all professional training and personal common sense, her heart did something warm and treacherous. She kept her face perfectly, beautifully still. That's not my name, she said. I know, he said quietly. But it fits you better than the one you gave me. I thought you should know that. The candle between them flickered. Neither of them moved. And 36 hours became something she didn't want to count anymore. She went for the drive on night 4. This was, objectively, the responsible thing to do. She had a job. She had a commanding officer on a countdown. She had an Interpol case file with real consequences for real people and a weapons deal that could not be allowed to proceed. She was Lieutenant Amora Mensah of the Ghanaian Naval Intelligence Division. She did not compromise missions for men with amber-brown eyes and unexpected laughs. The tower was quieter at 2 a.m., not empty, never empty. Jinho ran a 24-hour operation that made her frankly respect the organizational efficiency even as she was actively trying to undermine it, but quieter. The skeleton crew on the upper floors was smaller, the security rotation slightly longer. She'd been mapping it for 4 days. She knew exactly where the 2 guards on floor 23 changed positions at 2:17 a.m. She knew the biometric scanner had an 11-second lag after a successful authorization before it registered the door as closed. She had, through deeply impressive social engineering involving Jinho's assistant and a very convincing story about retrieving forgotten earrings, a partial imprint of the palm scanner frequency. She had a plan. It was a good plan. She was in the elevator, dressed in black, equipment in her jacket, breathing slow and even, when the elevator doors opened on floor 23. And Jinho was standing there. Not as an ambush. Not with guards or weapons or the particular cold expression she'd imagined a crime lord would wear when he caught someone infiltrating his operation. He was standing in the corridor in a charcoal sweater and bare feet, holding 2 cups of tea, looking at her with an expression that was exhausted and unsurprised and something that, God help her, looked a great deal like resigned tenderness. I made chamomile, he said. I wasn't sure if you'd prefer it to green, but it seemed like a 2 a.m. kind of tea. Amora stared at him. How long have you known? She asked. Since the rooftop. He held out the second cup. You have very good training. The cover is excellent. But you looked at my east elevator the way no journalist has ever looked at anything that wasn't another person. She didn't take the tea. Then why didn't you? Have you removed? He said it simply. Because I wanted to know why you were here. And then I wanted to know more about you. And then, he stopped. Set one of the cups down on the corridor table. Looked at her with the same unguarded exhaustion she'd seen that afternoon in his office. And then it became more complicated than that. Jinho. His name in her mouth felt like both a weapon and a surrender. I'm here for the Liang drive. I know. The weapons deal won't proceed. He said it simply, with a finality that had the weight of a decision already made. I shut it down yesterday morning. She stopped breathing. Why? She asked. He picked up his tea and looked at her steadily. Because it was the wrong deal. I've walked away from wrong deals before. A pause. And because I didn't want you to have to choose between your mission and, he stopped again. Looked away for one brief moment toward the window at the end of the corridor where Busan glittered in the dark. I didn't want to be something you had to work against. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Amora had ever stood inside. I still need the drive, she said finally. As evidence. For my report. I know. He reached into his sweater pocket and placed a small encrypted drive on the table beside the teacup. It's a copy. Everything that would implicate Liang and his intermediaries. Nothing that implicates my organization beyond the initial contact. He met her eyes. I'm not giving you everything, Amora. But I'm giving you enough. She looked at the drive. Looked at him. This could still end your operation, she said carefully. Only the parts that deserve to end. She picked up the drive. She also, slowly, picked up the tea. It was good. chamomile and something else, a warmth that sat in her chest like a decision. You have completely compromised my mission, she said. You walked into my building with a fake name and a palm scanner frequency, he said. I think we've compromised each other fairly evenly. She almost laughed. Managed not to. But it was close. I have to file a report, she said. I have to go home. The words tasted wrong in her mouth. My 36 hours are up. I know, he said again. And the simple, quiet acknowledgement of it, the lack of any attempt to stop her, the respect in it, hit her somewhere she hadn't expected. She should have left then. She set the tea down, straightened her jacket, and turned toward the elevator. She got 3 steps. Amora. She stopped. Will you come back? She stood with her back to him for 4 full seconds, which was 3 seconds longer than any operation protocol would allow for. Then she said, quietly, to the elevator doors, I don't know what I'm coming back as. Come back as yourself, he said. That's all I want. She stepped into the elevator. She did not let herself look back. She told herself, in the elevator, in the lobby, in the car that took her to the extraction point, that this was finished. Clean. Professional. She had the drive. The deal was dead. Mission, technically, accomplished. She filed her report on the flight home. She did not include the part about the chamomile tea. Or the way he'd said her name. Or the fact that somewhere over the Yellow Sea, she opened her phone and stared at his contact, which she absolutely should not have had, for a very long time. She did not message him. She almost did. 3 weeks later, she was home. Accra received her the way it always did, with heat and color and the particular generosity of a city that does not ask where you've been or what you've done there, just opens its arms and says you're back. Come in, are you hungry? The bougainvillea on her mother's front wall was rioting in pink and orange. The neighbor's radio was playing high life at a volume that suggested the neighbor believed music was a gift to be shared with the entire district. Her mother, Afia Mensa, hugged her for a long time at the door and didn't say anything at all, which meant she knew something was different and was giving Amora time to figure out what to do about it. This was either wisdom or strategy. With her mother, it was usually both. She slept for 14 hours. She ate her mother's contamaya stew and felt something unknot in her chest. She called Kofi and they talked for 2 hours about nothing important and everything necessary. She was fine. She was completely fine. She was sitting on the back veranda on day 5, watching the evening come in over the city, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. South Korean area code. The message read, I went to Jeju. She stared at it for a long time. Then she typed back, how was it? The reply came in under 30 seconds. My niece informed me that I smell like a boring office. She then made me wear a flower crown for approximately 2 hours. It was the best Saturday I've had in recent memory. Amora burst out laughing, alone on her veranda, into the warm Accra evening, startling a lizard off the wall. Photo or it didn't happen, she typed. 3 seconds later, a photo arrived. Seo Jinho, one of the most feared men in East Asia, architect of an empire built on silence and shadow, sitting cross-legged on a beach in a flower crown made of plastic daisies, holding a 4-year-old who was attempting to braid his hair with the joyful disregard for physics that only children possess. His expression was somewhere between mock suffering and helplessly delighted. Amora saved the photo. She was going to pretend she hadn't done that, but she did it anyway. You look ridiculous, she sent. I'm aware. She was very insistent. A pause. Then, are you well? She looked out at the city. The lights were coming on one by one, the way they always did, slow and certain, like the city was remembering itself. I'm home, she typed. Which was not an answer and was somehow the truest thing she could say. How is it? She thought about how to answer that. Thought about the stew and the bougainvillea and her mother's wordless hug and Kofi's voice and the specific quality of Accra air that settled something in her every single time. It's the most beautiful place in the world, she wrote. I am completely biased. His reply took longer this time. When it came, it was short, I'd like to see it. Her heart did the thing. She turned her phone face down on the veranda table and sat very still for approximately 4 to 5 seconds. Then she picked it up and typed, maybe you will. She did not sleep well that night. But the insomnia was warm, a thinking kind, a forward-looking kind, the kind that comes from possibility rather than dread. She lay in her childhood bed and looked at the ceiling fan turning slowly and thought about a man in bare feet in a corridor holding chamomile tea, and a flower crown on a beach, and the way someone could dismantle you so quietly you didn't notice until you were already undone. Commander Osei called her in the morning. "Good work on the Liang case," he said. "The drive gave us everything we needed. The Seoul liaison is extremely satisfied." A pause. "There's a debrief next Thursday. And Mensa, the case isn't fully closed. The SEO organization remains on the active watch list. We may need you for ongoing monitoring." "I understand, sir," she said. She understood, with absolute clarity, that the right answer to what was happening was to request a different assignment. A different country. A different complicated man in a different criminal empire who did not make her laugh and did not send photos of himself in flower crowns and did not say "come back as yourself" in corridors at 2 in the morning. She understood all of that. She requested assignment continuity. Osei paused. "You want to remain the lead on SEO." "I know the asset better than anyone," she said, which was both professionally accurate and personally true in ways she was not ready to examine out loud. "I can maintain the monitoring relationship." "Very well." She could hear in his voice that he was not entirely convinced, but he was also a man who understood that his best operative did not make unserious requests. "You'll return to Seoul in 6 weeks." She hung up and sat with the decision for a moment. Then she picked up her phone. 6 weeks, she typed. His reply came fast, "I'll be here." And then, after a moment, "Fair warning, my niece will want to meet you. She has opinions about flower crowns." Amora smiled at her phone in the Accra morning, in the house where she grew up, in the city she loved more than anywhere else in the world. "Tell her I have my own opinions about flower crowns," she typed back. "She'll love you." She put her phone down and looked out the window at the bougainvillea going loudly, joyfully pink against the morning sky. "I know," she thought, privately, to no one. She came back on a Tuesday. Jin-ho sent a car, which she hadn't asked for and couldn't decide whether to find presumptuous or considerate. She decided on considerate and accepted it, sitting in the back of the black sedan with her bag on her lap and the Seoul skyline scrolling past the window, trying to approach this with something resembling professional composure. She lasted approximately until the moment she walked into the private lobby of the SEO Tower and found him standing there himself, in a charcoal suit and no tie, looking at her with the particular expression she'd spent 6 weeks occasionally thinking about against her better judgment, that quiet, certain warmth, like a light left on. "You didn't have to come down," she said. "I know," he said. Which was, she was discovering, his answer to everything she said he didn't have to do. "This is still technically a monitoring assignment," she told him. "I know that too." He reached for her bag, she held on to it for a moment out of sheer stubbornness, then released it on the grounds that choosing her battles was a sign of maturity. "I've prepared a full access agreement. You can see any room in the building. Any file. Within reason." She raised an eyebrow. "Within reason." "I'm not a saint, Lieutenant. I know exactly what you are." He smiled. "And you came back anyway." She had no good answer to that. She went with, "Show me the building." Then, after a beat, "The whole building this time. Not the curated version." "Deal," he said. "Dinner first." "Is food your answer to everything?" "Only when I'm right, which is most of the time." The audacity. "Tables booked for 8. There's a place in Itaewon that does West African fusion. I had them add jollof to the menu." She stopped walking. "You had them add jollof to the menu?" "I described what you told me. They were very accommodating." She stared at him. "Seo Jin-ho." "Yes. You cannot just add jollof to a menu. I own the restaurant." A pause. "Of course you do," she said. The jollof was, in fact, exceptional, made by a chef who'd done her research and taken the challenge seriously, served with fried plantain and a stew that had actual palm oil in it, and Amora ate it across from Jin-ho in a quiet corner table with the kind of unself-conscious appetite that only comes from being deeply comfortable, which she noted with equal parts pleasure and alarm. "How is it?" he asked. "Don't you dare say I told you so." "I would never." "You're thinking it." "Constantly," he agreed pleasantly. He poured her more wine. "Tell me about the 6 weeks." So she did. Not the mission briefing. Not the OSE calls. The real 6 weeks, Kofi's new apartment and how he'd managed to make it look like a graduate student lived there despite being 29, her mother's campaign to get her to attend every social event in Accra simultaneously, the evening she'd spent sitting on the beach at Labadee watching the Atlantic come in and feeling pulled in 2 directions for the first time in her adult life. He listened. He was very good at listening, not the performative listening of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but the real kind, the kind that made you feel like your words were being held carefully. The Atlantic from Accra, he said when she'd finished. What's it like? She thought about it. Loud, she said. Insistent. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just arrives. She looked at him steadily across the table. I find it familiar. A beat. Are you comparing me to the Atlantic Ocean? He asked. Unfavorably, she said. The ocean doesn't try to add jollof to restaurant menus. He laughed. Long and real and warm, and the couple at the next table glanced over at the sound of it, surprised. This was clearly not a laugh people heard from him often. Amora filed that. Added it to the growing collection of things about him that she was keeping in a part of her chest that she pretended didn't exist. They walked back through Itaewon afterward, autumn so cool and alive around them, and somewhere between the restaurant and the street she stopped analyzing the situation and simply existed in it. The city and the night and him walking beside her close enough that their hands occasionally brushed, neither of them acknowledging it and neither of them moving apart. At one point, crossing a bridge over the Han River, she stopped to look at the water. He stopped beside her without a word. They stood like that for a while, the city reflected and trembling in the river below, and she thought, this is the part where, in any sensible version of her life, she pulls back. She thought, you are a Navy officer and he is a crime lord and this is a monitoring assignment and you are profoundly, spectacularly losing your grip on professional objectivity. She thought all of that. And she turned to say something sensible and practical and Lieutenant Mensa-shaped. He was already looking at her. The bridge lights caught the amber in his eyes. She said nothing sensible. She said, I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, he said immediately. Like he'd been waiting. Like the honesty of it had been right there the whole time. That's not reassuring. No, he agreed. But it's true. She looked back at the water. He stayed where he was, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the October night air. One day at a time, she said eventually. Mostly to herself. One day at a time, he agreed. And then, very quietly, with the careful deliberateness of someone doing something they couldn't take back and had decided not to, he reached out and covered her hand where it rested on the bridge railing. His hand over hers. Warm and steady and certain. She didn't move away. The river ran below them, taking the lights of the city with it, and Amora Mensah stood on a bridge in Seoul and let herself be held, just that much, by a man she had absolutely no business falling in love with. She was absolutely falling in love with him. He had a study on the 14th floor, not the famous office on 23 where deals were made and empires moved, but a smaller room, lined floor to ceiling with books, containing a desk that looked genuinely used and a window seat where someone had clearly spent long hours reading. The first time he showed it to her, she knew it was the most personal room in the building. She spent a lot of time in it. They developed, over the 2 weeks that followed, a routine that felt simultaneously entirely natural and completely improbable. Mornings, she conducted the parts of her monitoring work that required solitude and some semblance of objectivity. Afternoons, he showed her things. The charitable foundation he ran, earnestly, not as cover, that funded education programs in underserved communities across Southeast Asia. The architects he was working with to redesign 3 low-income housing developments in Incheon. The gap between who she'd been briefed he was and who he was in the daily turning of his actual life. You're confusing me, she told him one afternoon, standing in the foundation offices looking at a board covered in project maps. Good, he said. That's not, she gestured at the maps. This doesn't make you less dangerous. No, he agreed. But does it make me less honest? She had no answer for that. Evenings belonged to them, and this was the line she was drawing, right here, in the diary of her own heart. They cooked together twice, badly and entertainingly, in the kitchen on 17, a war of 2 people who each believed in their culinary tradition and were not prepared to surrender any ground. She made jollof the right way, the only way, she told him firmly, while he made Kim Kai jigigi and declared the two could coexist peacefully on the same table, which they could and did, splendidly. She taught him a few words in Chi. He taught her curse words in Korean and then pretended he hadn't, which he discovered by deploying them in front of his assistant Park Jun, who inhaled his coffee. She laughed for approximately 10 minutes. "You are a menace," Jin-ho told her, and the warmth in his voice when he said it was the particular warmth of a man who has encountered someone who surprises him and cannot get enough of it. "I've been called worse," she said cheerfully. On Thursday of the second week, she found him in the study at midnight, not reading, just sitting in the window seat looking at the city. She'd come down for water and found the light on. She stopped in the doorway. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Thinking," he said. "About?" He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, with the direct simplicity she'd come to understand as his particular form of courage, "About how much I want to ask you to stay and how little right I have to ask it." She crossed the room. Sat down in the window seat across from him, pulling her knees up, looking at him in the citterlight. "Say it anyway," she said. "Amora." Her name in his mouth was still, every time, simultaneously a wound and a gift. "I am a man with enemies. Real ones. The kind that don't stop. Whatever the foundation does, whatever I'm trying to build toward, there are parts of what I am that put people I care about in danger. I know that. I have never let myself forget it." She waited. "You are a Navy officer with a career and a country and a brother who would like you to come home to Accra in one piece," he continued. "You have a life that makes sense. A life I would be an interruption in." He looked at her steadily. "I don't want to be the interruption that costs you something irreplaceable." She was quiet for a moment. The city moved below them, patient and indifferent, all its lights turning in the dark. "Jin-ho," she said. "I defuse ordnance for a living. I have been shot at in international waters. I once spent 72 hours on a disabled submarine eating crackers and talking an anxious ensign through breathing exercises." She tilted her head. "I am not fragile." "I know," he said. "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" He looked at her long enough that she felt it in places she'd stopped pretending he couldn't reach. "I'm saying I'm in love with you," he said. Simple. Certain. Terrifying in the way of things that are entirely, irrevocably true. "I'm saying that I have been trying very hard not to be, and I appear to be spectacularly bad at it. And I'm saying that I need you to know the whole of what that means before you decide anything." Amora sat very still. The room was quiet. The city breathed below them. She thought about Accra. About the Atlantic arriving loud and insistent, not waiting to be ready. About her mother's wordless hug. About the specific quality of 6 weeks spent thinking about someone in ways that didn't fit neatly into any category her life had previously offered her. She reached across the window seat and took his hand. "I know what it means," she said. "I've been doing intelligence work for 12 years. I've read your file. I know who you are and what you run and what it costs." She met his eyes. "I'm still sitting in your window seat at midnight." The breath he released was slow. Something in his face changed. Not dramatically, not with the big visible collapse of a man giving up control, but with the quiet, enormous opening of a man who had been braced for impact for a very long time and was very slowly unclenching. "One day at a time," he said. Their words, from the bridge. "One day at a time," she said. He lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, not performatively, just genuinely, with the focused reverence of a man doing something he'd thought about and meant, and she let him, watching his face with the same direct clarity she brought to everything. "You're still going to monitor my organization," he said against her hand. "Extensively," she confirmed. "Of course. And if I find anything genuinely harmful." "You'll do your job," he said. "I expect nothing less." She studied him. "You're very calm about the fact that I'm professionally obligated to report on you. You're very calm about the fact that I'm professionally obligated to be worth reporting on." He lowered her hand but kept it. "We're managing an unusual situation." "Unusual," she repeated. "That's one word for it." "What word would you use?" She thought about it. Thought about the mission briefing and the rooftop and the chamomile tea and the flower crown photo and the jollof restaurant and this room and this window and his hand and 12 years of knowing exactly where she stood at every moment. "Inevitable," she said. He smiled, the slow, real one, the one she'd collected. Yes, he said. That's better. The threat came on a Tuesday. It arrived in the form of a black car, 3 men, and a message left for Jinho in a language she didn't speak but whose meaning she understood from the way every person in the Seo Tower shifted into a particular, careful stillness. She was with Park Jun when it happened, in the operations room, reviewing a logistics file that fell within the bounds of her monitoring agreement, and she read the shift in the room the way she'd been trained to read environments: temperature change, posture, the specific quality of silence that follows bad news. "What is it?" she asked Park Jun. He hesitated. He'd moved, over 2 weeks, from regarding her with deep professional suspicion to something that resembled cautious respect, primarily because she'd learned his coffee order and never once tried to get more information from him than she was entitled to. "The WAN group," he said carefully. "They've been," he chose his words, "communicating their displeasure with recent business decisions. The Liang deal. They know the deal was killed. They know someone killed it. They believe it was at the request of a foreign intelligence operative." His eyes met hers. Brief. Deliberate. "They know about me," she said. "They know there is a liability," Park Jun said. Diplomatically. She was already moving. She found Jinho on 23, the first time she'd been in the room that had started all of this. It was less dramatic than she'd imagined. A clean, spare office with a single window and a desk bearing 3 screens and a white orchid that seemed like someone's attempt at softening. He was standing at the window with his back to her when she entered, and he turned without surprise, like he'd been expecting her. "I know," she said, before he could speak. "Amora. I am not a liability," she said clearly. "I am a trained naval intelligence officer who has operated in active conflict zones, and whatever the WAN group thinks they know, they are not more dangerous than what I've already handled. They are dangerous in a specific way. So am I." She crossed the room and stood directly in front of him, close enough that there was no diplomatic distance left. "Jinho. Look at me." He looked at her. "I'm not leaving because of a threat. I'm not going to be removed from this situation by men in black cars who disapprove of your business decisions. If you want me gone, you say it to me directly. But I'm not leaving because I'm scared." The expression that moved across his face was complex, fear and fury and something so nakedly tender that she felt it like a hand around her heart. "I'm scared," he said. Not as a confession. As a fact, delivered with the same clear honesty he brought to everything. "Not of them. He stopped. Reached up and tucked a strand of her hair back, carefully, like it was something he'd been wanting to do and hadn't allowed himself. "I have never had something to lose before," he said quietly. "In 12 years. I have built walls and kept people at the necessary distance and it has been," he stopped again, "efficient. And very quiet. And now. Now it's loud," he said. "It's very, very loud, and I find I don't want it to be quiet again." She took his face in her hands. His hands came immediately to her waist, certain and warm. "Then let's deal with the WAN group," she said. "Together. Your organization and my intelligence resources make a formidable combination, and I have contacts in Seoul that can apply diplomatic pressure from a direction they won't expect." She met his eyes. "This is what I do. Let me do it." "You are the most extraordinary person I have ever met," he said. "I know," she said. "Focus." He almost laughed. They worked through the night, a genuine tactical collaboration, his knowledge of the WAN group's operations intersecting with her intelligence access in ways that produced, by morning, a strategy that was clean, effective, and left no ambiguity about what retaliation would cost. By noon the next day, the WAN group had communicated their withdrawal. Park Jun, when he brought them coffee and the confirmation, looked at Amora with an expression that was unambiguously respectful. "You're good," he said. "I know," she said. "Is there food?" That evening, they sat in the kitchen on 17 with takeout containers between them and the lights of Busan doing their nightly glittering thing below, and she leaned against his shoulder because she wanted to and she was tired and he was warm and she had decided, somewhere around 4 a.m. during the strategy session, to stop pretending she wasn't in love with this man. He pressed his lips to the top of her head without a word. They stayed like that for a while. "I'm going to have to go back to Accra," she said. "In 2 weeks. For the formal debrief." I know. And then there will be a decision to make. About the assignment. She paused. About what form this takes going forward. Officially and unofficially. I know, he said again. His arm tightened around her slightly. I'll be here. You keep saying that. I keep meaning it. She turned her face slightly into his shoulder. Outside, Seoul went on being brilliant and enormous and indifferent to the particular enormity of small things happening inside it. Jin-ho. Yes. I love you. She said it to his shoulder, which was not entirely dignified, but she had decided that she was done saving things for better moments when this moment was, genuinely, very good. His whole body stilled. Then relaxed, deeply, fundamentally, the way a body relaxes when it has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has finally, at last, been allowed to set it down. I know, he said, and she could hear the smile in it, real and quiet and completely undone. I've been waiting for you to say it. Incredibly arrogant. Statistically confident. He pressed another kiss to her hair. I love you. I will love you in ways that are inconvenient to both of us for what I expect will be a very long time. She laughed into his shoulder. Poetic, she said. I'm learning from the best. She was packing. 10 days left before Accra. She was packing slowly, as she had discovered, because packing required choosing what to take and what to leave, and she was finding herself very reluctant to make that distinction in every sense of the word. Jin-ho appeared in the doorway of the guest suite, still hers, still, technically, the separate quarters arrangement that they both maintained with a fidelity that had become increasingly theoretical, and leaned against the frame watching her. You've been packing that bag for 40 minutes, he observed. I'm being thorough. You've moved the same scarf 3 times. It's a difficult scarf. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed, watching her with the quiet, full attention that she had once catalogued as a threat and now received as the gift it was. Come to Jeju with me, he said. She looked at him. What? This weekend. Before you go. Minha's birthday party. He held up his phone, a voice message, clearly his niece's, high and urgent. Uncle Ginny, bring the lady. I want to meet the lady. She found out about you, he said, with great dignity. I take no responsibility. Amora stared at him. How does a 4-year-old know about me? She's very perceptive. Also my sister. He said this as if it explained everything, which, she was beginning to understand, it probably did. Jin-ho, going to your family's. I know what it means, he said. Gently. Without pressure. I also know you leave in 10 days and I want, he paused. I want you to have something real to take with you. Not just us in this building. Real. She looked at her difficult scarf. Looked at him. She thought about the Atlantic arriving without waiting for you to be ready. Does Minha have opinions about flower crowns? She asked. Extensive ones. Then pack me something warm. Jeju's cooler than Busan. The smile that broke across his face was, she thought, probably going to undo her for the rest of her life, and she found she was completely at peace with that. Jeju was, as promised, cooler. It was also spectacularly beautiful in the way of places that know they don't have to try. Black volcanic stone and green hillsides and a coast that went on forever. His sister Seo Miney was 32 and clever and watched Amora for the first 10 minutes with the careful assessment of a woman who loved her brother and had been waiting for proof that someone worthy was paying attention to him. By the end of lunch, Miney had decided Amora was worthy. She declared this by refilling Amora's glass and saying, in the tone of someone settling a long-standing argument, "You're the only person I've seen make him laugh like that. Don't let him be an idiot about it." Miney, Jin-ho started. I'm talking to Amora now, Miney said serenely. You can speak when I'm finished. Amora hid her smile in her wine glass. Minha was everything the flower crown photo had promised and considerably more. She was 4 years old, furiously opinionated, and immediately declared that Amora had the best hair she'd ever seen and could she touch it, which Amora consented to with the graciousness of a woman who had made peace with her hair being a source of general fascination in East Asia. Minha spent 20 minutes carefully examining Amora's braids, then announced her conclusion, like a princess who also fights. That's exactly right, Amora told her. Uncle Janai said you fight bad guys. Sometimes. Is Uncle Janai a bad guy? The silence that followed was the kind that only children can produce. Pure, earnest, impossible to evade. Amora looked at Jinho. He looked back at her, with a particular helplessness that was both entirely uncharacteristic and deeply endearing. Your uncle Jinnai, Amora said carefully, is trying very hard to be a good guy. And I think he's going to make it. Minha considered this with the solemnity of a judge. Okay, she said. Then, flower crown time. They were both made to wear flower crowns. Amora wore hers with the full dignity of a naval officer and a considerable amount of barely contained joy. Jinho photographed her in it. She took the phone and photographed him back. He took it again and photographed both of them, and the photo, Minha between them both wearing her crowns, Amora laughing, Jinho looking at Amora the way people look at things they can't believe they have, was so honest and so human and so unexpectedly hers that she asked him to send it to her, and he did immediately, without a word. That evening, they sat on the porch of the house and watched the Jeju coast go dark, Minha asleep inside, Miney discreetly absent, the stars beginning over the water. Stay, he said. Not the desperate kind of stay. The quiet, certain, I mean this kind. She turned to look at him. We live in different countries, she said. Flights exist. I have a career. A career that currently includes Seoul as a monitoring assignment. He met her eyes. I'm not asking you to give anything up. I'm asking you to keep something. She looked at the water. The Jeju coast was quieter than the Atlantic, not less present, just differently patient. My commanding officer already has questions about my objectivity, she said. Do you care? She thought about it. Honestly. Lieutenant Mensah, 12 years, service record impeccable, always objective, always clear-eyed, always exactly where she was supposed to be. No, she said. And was surprised by how completely she meant it. He reached over and took her hand on the porch railing. Their hands, by now, knew each other, settled together with the ease of things that have found their fit. So, she said. So, he said. We are doing this. We appear to be doing this. She laughed. He smiled. The stars came out over Jeju. She was going to Accra in 10 days. She was going to sit across from Commander Osei and file a report that contained more omissions than it should. She was going to call Kofi and tell him, with whatever portion of honesty she could manage, that she'd done something unexpected in Seoul. She was going to sit on her mother's veranda and feel the Atlantic arrive loud and insistent from the west, and she was going to, for the first time, feel pulled east as well. She was going to come back. And Jinho was going to be here. They were building something. Improbable and inconvenient and real in the way of things that don't fit into any of the categories you'd prepared for. The most real thing, maybe, that either of them had had. She tightened her hand in his. He turned to say something. His phone rang. He glanced at it, and she saw it on his face before he controlled it. The stillness. The particular way his jaw set. What is it? She asked. He looked at her. And the expression on his face, the careful, guarded worry of a man who was trying to protect her from something and didn't know if he could, made her stomach drop with a precision that had nothing to do with the ocean. Jinho. Her voice was steady. Tell me. He turned the phone screen to face her. A photo. Surveillance quality, grainy but clear enough. A face she recognized, a face she was not supposed to recognize, not from this world, not from this life. A man she had personally handed a sealed classified file on 3 years ago in a naval briefing in Accra. A man who was supposed to be in custody. He was standing outside the CEO Tower in Busan. He was not in custody. And written below the photo, in a message from an unknown number, were 6 words that turned the warm Jeju evening into something cold and irreversible. She is not who she says. The stars above Jeju were very beautiful and very indifferent, and Amora Mensah looked at the phone and looked at Jinho and felt the specific, clarifying silence of someone who has just realized the mission was never over. It had only just begun. And someone who knew both of them, someone with access to sealed files and surveillance networks and the particular patience of a hunter, had been watching them fall in love the whole time. To be continued in part 2. Comment below. Did you see that ending coming? Drop where you're watching from and tell me, Team Amora, Team Jinho, or Team I need part 2 right now. Like, subscribe, and don't you dare go anywhere. Part 2 is coming, and it will leave you even more speechless than this.